Johnny Depp won the most public trial of the decade and lost his career anyway. By every historical rule of justice, Johnny Depp won. He spent years in the most public legal battles of the century, faced a mountain of allegations, and emerged victorious with a definitive verdict in his favor. Millions of people cheered for his vindication. By any traditional metric of justice, the story is over, the slate should be clean, but it isn't. Institutional trust, the kind held by major studios and global boardrooms, is supposed to work like a credit score. You spend decades building it up so that if you are ever hit with liability, you can pay the cost of the defense and restore your standing. In the old model of fame, vindication equals restoration. If you prove the world was wrong about you, the world is supposed to give you your life back. Inside the modern attention system, however, this model has broken. For a figure like Johnny Depp, the victory was social, but the defeat was structural. The contradiction is this. We see a man who was publicly cleared and widely embraced by the public, yet he remains an exile in the halls of power at Disney and Warner Brothers. He has the applause of the crowd, but he no longer has the keys to the multi-billion-dollar franchises. We wait for the big return, the blockbuster franchise, the luxury brand endorsements, the return to the center of the industry, but the restoration never comes. The uncomfortable implication is that in the current economy of power, you can prove your innocence and still remain a liability. Vindication doesn't actually delete the record, it just archives the damage. In a system that prioritizes the avoidance of friction over the pursuit of truth, the middle ground is a graveyard. So the pattern isn't random, it's what the modern attention system requires. When doing everything right fails to bring power back, what is it that we are actually witnessing? The obvious explanation for Johnny Depp's stalled recovery is a moral one. We tell ourselves the trial was too messy for family brands, or that executive suites are simply tired of the drama. We treat his continued exclusion as a series of individual choices made by nervous studio heads or a case of bad timing. But that explanation treats the outcome as a mistake. It assumes that if the circumstances were slightly different, the machine would have welcomed Depp back with open arms. What if it's the opposite? What if his inability to reclaim his power is the most high-fidelity response to how institutional trust actually works today? We need to move past the who of the courtroom and look at the how of the system. We have to ask why institutional trust has become a one-way street. To answer that, we have to look at the machinery that turns a vindicated star into a permanent risk. We have to understand the logic of a system where being right doesn't actually make you safe again. If the system only values the absence of noise, then proving the truth is just a louder way of being a problem. To understand why this outcome feels so inevitable, we must name the mechanism driving it, call it the liability lock-in. In the legacy media era, a studio could rehabilitate a star. They owned the distribution channels, so they could choose to stop talking about the scandal and start talking about the new movie. They could force a reputation back into the center. But in an algorithmic environment, information is permanent, decentralized, and infinitely searchable. This has created a new kind of math called permanent pricing. Think of it as a specialized form of insurance. Before the allegations, Depp was a low-premium asset. After the allegations, he became a high-premium asset. To hire him again, a corporation doesn't just pay for his acting. They have to pay the institutional risk premium. They must be prepared to answer for his history at every board meeting and shareholder call for the next decade. This is the lock-in. Once a name is indexed alongside a global controversy, the system locks that association into its risk model. For a massive corporation, the logical move isn't to do justice. It's to find a replacement who doesn't come with a premium attached. There was a transition where the restoration became structurally impossible, the point where the jury delivered a verdict of innocence, but the boardrooms delivered a verdict of silence. A legal victory should be a signal for brands to return. But for Depp, that didn't happen. This was the moment it became clear that the goal of these brands wasn't to wait for the truth, it was to wait for the noise to stop. When the verdict was read and the brands did not move, the signal was sent that he was no longer a viable partner for global commerce. This was the point where it was over. The verdict became secondary to the sheer volume of noise generated. By the time he won, he was no longer an actor. He was a genre of content that studios could not control. Institutions have no incentive to reverse their position. The system clicks forward. Restoration is priced out. In the logic of the liability lock-in, maintenance is punished and escalation is rewarded. Winning quietly restores power. Winning loudly destroys it. Depp fought for the truth and trusted the process, assuming a total legal win would be his ticket back to the center. But in the modern attention economy, the more you fight to clear your name, the more you inadvertently fuel the controversy. By winning so publicly, he made the crisis permanent. While he was gaining followers, he was losing the institutional trust required for a billion-dollar franchise. Reversal at this stage triggers catastrophic penalties. A company that dropped you once has no incentive to admit an overreaction, as doing so creates its own secondary PR risk. Any new project would be subject to a permanent friction tax. Hiring him means every marketing campaign for the next 5 years will be hijacked by questions about his past. For a brand, these are costs they simply cannot afford to pay. The system operates on the path of least resistance, and once an actor becomes the source of the resistance, they are no longer the path. Zoom out. This is an incentive structure, not a story about a single career. Attention rewards the initial accusation because drama is a high-yield event, while vindication is merely a quiet data point in a messy archive. In this environment, trust mutates into a calculation of systemic friction. It is no longer a legal status that restores your power, it is a statistical outlier that determines your institutional insurance premium. Institutions reward silence and safety because safety is the only thing that preserves frictionless growth. If the cost of managing the noise around you is higher than the profit you generate, you are functionally guilty in the eyes of the machine, regardless of what the law says. When the price of being right is the permanent attachment of your name to a crisis, the system no longer has a place for you. We are left looking at the man who won everything and realizing that in this era, even doing everything right does not bring power back anymore. This is what the system does. It doesn't seek fairness, it seeks a return to quiet. And once you have been the source of the noise, you become the very obstacle the system is built to bypass. When reputation becomes a permanent liability, the truth becomes a cost that the system refuses to pay.